I'm Jennifer Purcell, and welcome to my podcast, Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge, where we will discuss, discover, and learn more about the challenges and triumphs of those with NLD and other learning challenges. I do have a website for this podcast, and it is called livingwithnld.com. I also have a Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter account for the podcast. They are all under the same name, which is Living with NLD. I also have a YouTube channel for the podcast, which can be found by Googling the title of the podcast, which is Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge. I would like to tell you about a nonprofit that I use for my research for this podcast. It is called the NVLD Project, and I use their blog for my research. They are a nonprofit that is based in New York and is trying to get NVLD back on the DSM, and they provide many resources for people with NVLD on their website. I'll provide you with the website for them in the podcast description. All proceeds from the ads on this podcast will be donated towards the NVLD project. Please feel free to explore the other topics on the podcast, and hopefully you will learn something new from them. I hope you enjoy today's episodes. I also wanted to let you know that I started a Patreon account for this podcast to try to get some more revenue from it. That's not the reason why I started this podcast, but I'm trying to get some revenue from the podcast because it will help me keep it going. So if you are willing to donate even $1 or $2 or $5, whatever amount is comfortable for you, to Patreon for Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge, that would be appreciated. You can also use Spotify to donate money, and you can also use BetterHelp to donate money with clicking on the link and becoming a customer of BetterHelp. So those are 3 different ways you can support the podcast, and I hope that you will choose which way works for you, and that you will choose which level works for you as well. And I hope that you do it because the podcast helps you also, and that you are willing to support me in continuing to produce it. Thank you. And today I am very excited to announce that BetterHelp is now sponsoring this podcast. I have had 7 years of therapy, so I know it can help change your life if you not only let it, but work on the personal goals that you set with your therapist. Without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is therapy works. But what is therapy exactly? It's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help. Or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships at work, not dealing well with stress. Whatever you need, it's time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles and start feeling better because you deserve to be happy. And now you don't have to worry about finding an in-person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. Join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself because you are the greatest asset. And special offering to listeners of Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge. You can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com/ I'll put in the link in the podcast description for you. That's BetterHelp, HELEP. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast.
Good morning, or maybe it's good afternoon, good evening for you, depending on where you're listening from. So today's topic will be about Tylenol causing ADHD and ASD claims, which have been going around on Instagram. At least that's where I've been seeing them. And I think they're pretty bogus. I could be wrong with that, but that's my opinion. So I'm covering this because even though it's not about NLD in particular, there's no reason why somebody couldn't make a claim about a medication causing NLD, right? Um, and This claim has been going around since last year. I noticed it late last year. Like I said, I don't think it's true because usually you are born neurodiverse, and it's not due to a medication. It's usually due to genes, head injury, or emotional trauma. And I know that the cause for autism hasn't really been found, but I don't think it's medication. I think it's probably something similar to ADHD or NLD or other neurodivergent diagnoses where you're born with it, and the fact that you're born with it could be because of something to do with your birth or something to do with before your birth, when you were in your mother's stomach, um, or something to do with genes in your family, or something that shortly happened after your birth with a head injury, or emotional trauma. So below is a quote from an article, which is the first one I'm going to be using today, called "What Causes Autism" from Autism Speaks. The information below is not meant to diagnose or treat. It should not take the place of consultation with a qualified healthcare professional. A common question after an autism diagnosis is, what is the cause of autism? We know that there is no cause of autism. Research suggests that autism develops from a combination of genetic and non-genetic or environmental influences. These influences appear to increase the risk that a child will develop autism. However, it's important to keep in mind that increased risk is not the same as cause. For example, some gene changes associated with autism can also be found in people who don't have the disorder. Similarly, not everyone exposed to an environmental risk factor for autism will develop the disorder. In fact, most will not. Autism's genetic risk factors. Research tells us that autism tends to run in families. Changes in certain genes increase the risk that a child will develop autism. If a parent carries one or more of these gene changes, they may get passed to a child, even if the parent does not have autism. Other times, these genetic changes arise spontaneously in an early embryo or the sperm and or egg that combine to create the embryo. Again, the majority of those gene changes do not cause autism by themselves. They simply increase risk for the disorder. Autism's environmental risk factors. Research also shows that certain environmental influences may further increase or reduce autism risk in people who are genetically predisposed to the disorder. Importantly, the increase or decrease in risk appears to be small for any one of these factors. These risk factors. Increased risk. Advanced parent age, either parent, pregnancy and birth complications, extreme prematurity before 26 weeks, low birth weight, multiple pregnancies, twin, triplet, etc. Pregnancies spaced less than 1 year apart. Decreased risk. prenatal vitamins containing folic acid before and at conception and through pregnancy. No effect on risk. Vaccines. Each family has a unique experience with an autism diagnosis, and for some, it corresponds with the timing of their child's vaccinations. At the same time, scientists have conducted extensive research over the last 2 decades to determine whether there is any link between childhood vaccinations and autism. The result of this research is clear. Vaccines do not cause autism. Let me repeat that. Vaccines do not cause autism. American Academy of Pediatrics has compiled a comprehensive list of this research. Differences in brain biology. How do these genetic and non-genetic influences give rise to autism? Most appear to affect crucial aspects of early brain development. Some appear to affect how brain nerve cells or neurons communicate with each other. Others appear to affect how entire regions of the brain communicate with each other. Research continues to explore these differences with an eye to develop treatments and support that can improve quality of life. So, what I want to share about that article is that even though it was about autism, and usually I talk about NLD on this podcast, I'm sharing about autism because it is similar to NLD. And some of the similarities are that NLD and autism can be caused by, like we were reading, genetics and a combination of environmental facts. And also, NLD and autism can be caused by things that go on during your birth or after your birth, with being born early, and I think the other one was with going back to the article with low birth weight and multiple pregnancies. I remember reading from other articles with NLD that sometimes prematurity does cause NLD. I'm not sure about the low birth weight or multiple pregnancies, but the fact that NLD and autism have similar causes, that's why I'm linking these two things. And the fact that parents thinking that vaccines can cause autism has been going around for a while too. I know this is on Tylenol, but they're both medications in different forms, right? So it's like, it doesn't make sense to me, maybe that's because I'm a neurodivergent, why a neurotypical would think that a medication is going to cause the neurodivergence or diagnosis. It's like, that just doesn't make sense. Maybe if you're willing to comment on that, if you're neurotypical or neurodivergent and you've had those thoughts before, I would be willing to listen or read why you would think that. I'd be curious. So the second article is titled, Autism Rates Have Tripled. Is it now more common, or are we just better at diagnosis? New research suggests doctors have improved at identifying autism, especially among children with average or above average IQs, but that doesn't fully explain the trend. It is by Aria Bendix, and it was published in January of this year. Okay, quote. Although there is no medical test for autism, the CDC has established a network of 17 sites across the country that estimate autism rates based on a combination of formal medical diagnosis and records from schools and healthcare providers. Nationally, the rise in autism rates have been similar to the trend in New York and New Jersey, according to a 2021 CDC report. 1 in 54 children have been diagnosed with autism by the age of 8 in 2016, compared to 1 in 150 in 2000. Advanced in diagnostic capabilities and greater uh, let me start over. Advances in diagnostic capabilities and greater understanding and awareness of autism spectrum disorder seem to be largely driving the increase. The Reuters researchers said, but there's probably more to the story. Genetic factors and perhaps some environmental ones too might also be contributing to the trend. Close quote. So the reason why I brought in that article and quote was because it gives you a reason why autism is increasing without pointing it to medication. It says that we are getting better at diagnosing autism, and that is probably why it's been increasing, because if you get better at diagnosing autism or other neurodivergence disorders, you are going to see those numbers go up, because then your tests or whatever you use to um, come to the diagnosis is going to be, how do I explain this? Is going to be more likely to show that that person has autism, ADHD, NLD, or a combination of learning disabilities, or dysgraphia or dyscalculia or dyslexia, etc. And because the tests are better, or the doctor who is doing the diagnosis or the school is getting better at doing it, it's going to show more favorable results. And I would say that's also true it for it being more accurate, because I know sometimes neurodivergence diagnoses aren't very accurate, and that could be because of the test, or that could be because um, of the organization doing the test. I don't think it has to do with the person doing it, because they do the best that they can at those tests, speaking from experience. All right, so the third article is Beware the Tylenol Autism Freakout. A new study claims a link between Tylenol use while pregnant and autism in children. The only problem is the science is riddled with holes. By Samantha Allen, updated in April of 2017, published in July of 2016. For expecting women, and this is the quote, for expecting women, a strong link between Tylenol or episeptimifenin, probably didn't say that right, and autism would be cause for alarm. But despite a recent flurry of alarmist headlines, the evidence for such an association is still lacking. Pregnant women generally rely on Tylenol, a painkiller on acetaminophen, a painkiller commonly found in Tylenol. Can't say that. Rather than potentially risking ibuprofen to manage fevers and pain. But after a June study in the International Journal of Epidemiology turned up a link between acetaminophen use during pregnancy and the incidence of autism and ADHD in children, the media was quick to exaggerate the findings. As the UK's National Health Service (NHS) was quick to point out in response, the study provides no evidence of a direct link to either condition. Here's what the study of over 2,500 mother-child pairs in Spain actually found. Male children who had been exposed to the painkiller in utero experienced symptoms of autism and ADHD in a way that seemed dependent on the frequency of exposure. For female children, only the link between acetaminophen, I'm doing the best to pronounce it, I'll spell it out for you. ACETAMIONOPHEN. That's what I was trying to say. And attention related symptoms can be confirmed. So that was the end of that quote. And I would say that that is a good article because it is showing you that the claims that have been going around about Tylenol causing autism and ADHD, the evidence, like the article said, is being exaggerated. So therefore, it is riddled with holes. That's what the article said. And I agree with them. I'm probably biased being a neurodivergent saying that, but I do agree with them because if you're exaggerating your findings with any research, how can anybody trust your findings, right? It doesn't matter what the findings and the research is about. How can anybody trust them if you're exaggerating them? You know the answer. They can't. And if they do, it just doesn't make any sense. At least not in my mind. All right. So, sorry, I think I lost my place. The next article, yeah, okay. The next article is Tylenol autism lawsuit from MZ. Quote, our attorneys are reviewing Tylenol autism lawsuits for parents throughout the country. This new lawsuit, which includes ADHD and ADD claims, has the potential to lead to the largest payout in U.S. mass tort class action history. A Tylenol autism class action lawsuit was certified in late 2022. Our law firm expects over 100,000 victims will file a Tylenol autism lawsuit. If successful, the jury pays out and settlement amounts for a Tylenol lawsuit could be high. These lawsuits may settle in 2023, and a new warning label will be added to protect unborn children. What are the Tylenol autism lawsuits about? The basis for these new acetaminophen lawsuits is new scientific research suggesting that the popular painkiller Tylenol, or generic, I'm not going to even try to say it, during pregnancy may increase the risk of having a baby with autism. This new evidence linking Tylenol to autism has led to a growing number of product liability lawsuits against manufacturers and retailers by parents of children with autism. Our lawyers predicted that the rising number of Tylenol autism lawsuits would lead to a new class action, and settlement amounts would be offered to compensate parents and autistic children. We got the first prediction right and believe the second will come, although the time horizon will be much longer. Close quote. So, with that article, it's saying why they have these Tylenol lawsuits coming up and who they're coming from. It's likely coming from neurotypical parents. I don't think it's coming from neurodivergent parents because I might be wrong with saying that, But I don't think a neurodivergent parent would do a lawsuit for their neurodivergent child with Tylenol or with other medications and thinking that that medication caused their child to have the neurodivergent diagnosis that they have. That just doesn't make sense in my mind. For neurotypicals, it only makes sense in my mind that they would do that if they don't really understand how their child got the neurodivergent um, disorder that they have. And the reason they probably don't understand it is because they haven't done enough research about what causes it. And even if they have done the research, they might not be understanding the research that they've done. Um, so I'm not blaming them. I'm just saying that might be what is the case. Um, and doing the research and understanding it is good, not just for you, but for your child, no matter what age they are, because then you can help them more, or you can at least find somebody who can help them more if you can't do it for whatever reason or reasons. So the next article is titled Limited Evidence of a Link Between Tylenol and Autism or ADHD by Kate Yadelin, posted on February 22nd of 2023 this year. Studies, quote, studies of, there's that word again I can't pronounce, I'll just say Tylenol, during pregnancy have weaknesses. Okay, so I was quoting the fourth article and I stopped because I wanted to try to pronounce the generic term for Tylenol, which is acetaminophen. Got it. So acetaminophen, called paracetamol outside the US, is used widely during pregnancy to treat pain and fever. It is an ingredient in many over-the-counter and prescription medications, including Tylenol, Dayquil, NyQuil, Excedrin, Sudafed, Mixicin, Midol, Oxycodone, Visodin, and others. As we said, some studies have found that women who've reported using acetaminophen during pregnancy were more likely than those who didn't to have children who later developed autism or ADHD. A 2018 paper published in the American Journal of Epidemiology that aimed to comprehensively analyze data from multiple studies, for example, found a 34% and 19% higher risk for ADHD and autism, respectively, in children whose mothers took acetaminophen in pregnancy compared with those whose mothers did not. But this does not necessarily mean acetaminophen is to blame for the conditions. These studies were observational, meaning that researchers simply noted levels of acetaminophen exposure, generally based on reports from the parents in the studies. Randomized controlled trials in which one group receives a medication or treatment and another group receives a placebo or standard care are the golden standard for determining whether a cause relationship exists. Close quote. I'm going to do, okay, so I'm going to do some quick thoughts on that. This is also showing why the claims on acetaminophen causing ADHD and autism are not very good claims, because the research is very good. It's just on observation. It's not on randomized controlled trials. So they need to be done on those. All right, last article. Tylenol linked to autism and ADHD from Mick Witter, Belgium, and Associates of PA. Acetaminophen, quote, commonly sold under the brand name Tylenol, is one of the most widely used painkillers and fever reducers in the United States and can be bought over the counter and at any supermarket or drugstore. Although it was previously considered safe to use during pregnancy, a growing body of research has linked prenatal Tylenol use with autism spectrum disorder, ASD, and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. However, makers of Tylenol and other products containing acetaminophen have ignored those studies and failed to warn parents of these risks posed to their unborn children. Instead, they have continued to market acetaminophen as being safe to use during pregnancy. Prenatal uses of acetaminophen linked to autism and ADHD. Research has found that acetaminophen can negatively affect a child if their mother uses the painkillers while pregnant, something which an estimated 70% of pregnant women do. Since it has historically been referred to as a safe way to relieve pain and fever during pregnancy. In addition to being sold as Tylenol, acetaminophen is present in more than 600 other products, including NyQuil, DayQuil, and etc. In May 2021, a study published in the European Journal of Ophthalmology found that children exposed to acetaminophen before birth were 19% more likely to develop autism and 21% more likely to show signs of ADHD. Close quote. So I'm going to wrap up. So my thoughts about that last article and all the articles, I hope that they show you that Tylenol or acetaminophen does not cause autism or ADHD. There might be claims that it does, but the research behind those claims is not good research. So you can't trust it. You need to trust research that has been done with randomized control, I think is what it was called, where you have clients or patients of the research take Tylenol in this case, or acetaminophen, and ones that do not take it, they take the placebo. And you need to compare those results of those two sets of clients, the controlled one and the other category, the Tylenol and then the placebo. You compare those two, the results of those two findings, and then you report those findings. That's how you do research. And I know that from school. I mean, I'm not a science, but I know that from school. And that, I'm not a scientist. So it's like, or the one that would be doing the research, that's what you need to do. And so I'm hoping that this was a helpful episode for you and that you learned something from it and that you are able to help people who do think that them taking Tylenol or a medication with acetaminophen cause their child to have ASD or ADHD. That's not true. Because the research is not good and it is exaggerating their findings. So, I will talk to you next Friday. And I hope you have a good week.
I also want to mention to you that I just launched my podcast swag on Wednesday of this week and have a page for it on my website, and I will also send you the link to it in the podcast description, and I will also send it to you in the newsletter that I usually send out on Fridays. I am now selling t-shirts, water bottles, and a backpack, and
they all have the podcast logo and title on it and the tagline. So I'm looking forward to watching the sales and seeing who buys them, and spreading the word more about my podcast.
As I wrap up, there are some things I would like to share with you. I do have a website for this podcast. It is called livingwithnld.com. I also have a Facebook and Instagram page for this podcast. It is called Living with NLD. I will include the links for those in the description. In conclusion, I would like to hear from my audience. If you know individuals with NLD that I could interview for this podcast, please email me at livingwithnld@gmail.com. What are you interested in learning about NLD? I know I'm not an expert, but I do know I have the living experience of having it. I would like you to practice journaling about your gifts and differences. Also, see if there is a way that you can make that difference become easier for you to do than originally it was. Thank you for listening today, and please go to my YouTube channel and subscribe to it. Thank you. Bye.